Welcome to my first voiceover. Please excuse my random German accent or any mistakes I make. This is the first time that I'm talking in a video and I'm very nervous. So today we are going to have a look into the Chameleon art products, and as you might have seen, I have the full product range at home. And Chameleon kindly asked me to make a video for this month's theme, which is developing your talent. So I'm going to show you how I color, what my favorite products are, as well as some tips and tricks to help you to develop your talent. So the first thing I always do is coloring the skin. Don't ask me why. I used 3 different skin tones and a blush to make a smooth gradient between the light and the dark skin tone. I used a so-called color top, and those are special caps that you can put on top of a nib. The marker will soak up the color and draw a nice smooth gradient. It's amazing. It's best shown when I color the dress, but let's just focus on the skin for now. After drawing the base layer, I use a dark color to draw shadows. You can always layer markers to get a more saturated tone, and this is where I go over some areas several times. And to get some harder shadows, I always use colored pencils to blend everything in and create a comic look. And to create some highlights in the end, I always use a white gel pen for literally everything. So for this drawing, after drawing the skin, I proceeded to draw the character's gold elements, and coloring metals is my favorite. I used 2 yellow colors for this to create a gradient and used brown for some shadows. So the good thing about the Chameleon colored pencils is that they come in 2 matching colors, a dark and a light one, that blend very well together. As you can see, I often just flip the pen around to blend the darker color with the lighter one, which is very useful. Another yellow detail were her sleeves, which I decided to keep a little more decent. The Chameleon markers themselves have a mixing chamber that can create a gradient from a lighter tone back to the original color by infusing the nib. And depending on how long the nib is in the chamber, the length and smoothness of the gradient varies. And this is definitely a little bit tricky when it comes to smaller or curvy areas, but it's a lot of fun once you got the hang of it. And again, to create some pleats, I used the same marker again, as well as colored pencils to draw some shadows. The dress was my favorite part of the whole drawing. And before coloring the main fabric, I went over the frill with light and dark red tones. For those small areas, I didn't necessarily need to use a color top because these very similar tones just blend between themselves on paper pretty easily. To give it some depth, I used the darker colored pencils again and blended it with the lighter side of the duo. I'm really into crazy gradients. And from my experience, it's very hard to blend two different colors without having to use a lot of different markers. And therefore, I'm very happy to have the color tubs. I used the red and infused it with a bright yellow, and since this is my first time drawing with color tops, I'm not too experienced yet, so there was an area on the left where I struggled a little bit, but I just went over it a few times and smoothened it up. And if you know my gallery, you know that I'm actually always drawing skirts because it's just so much fun sketching and coloring them in a dynamic pose, but I should definitely challenge myself to draw some more trousers. As almost every alcoholic marker, the Chameleon ones have two nibs, a super soft brush nib as well as a Japanese bullet nib, which is hard and very useful for smaller areas. It gives a little bit more control and is also working with the color chambers. And the cool thing about alcohol markers is that you can easily use a lighter colored pencil, like a yellow or a white in this case, to lighten up an area. So one of the last things to finish, besides the details that I didn't include in the video, was her hair. I decided to go with a nice natural brown with her braids turning into a cherry red. I actually used the same red all over her dress. I again put the brown marker into the color chamber and just colored in her braids. For the streaks, I used the dark brown and the darker red and colored over it with even darker colored pencils. And to get some reflections on her hair, I used the white colored pencils and a gel pen, of course. Actually, in school I was always asking myself why they would provide a white pencil in every set, but now I know. So I really love how this drawing turned out, and because I had so much content, I wasn't able to include every single detail I drew. In the end, I just put highlights everywhere with my almighty gel pen and went over the outlines again, because they sometimes get a little transparent when you erase the sketch or draw over them with colored pencils. I also drew her a white border on the end of the dress, as well as some shiny stars around the gemstones. So I hope you liked this tutorial and my first horrible voiceover. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. Bye bye!